The day Lena Hartwell lost her job, she was wearing her best blazer. She had ironed it the night before, carefully, while her 8-year-old son Mateo slept in the next room. She had set her alarm for 5:30. She had rehearsed what she would say in the quarterly review, the numbers she had prepared, the projection she had stayed up until midnight building. She had done everything right. That didn't matter to Preston Holloway. Preston was the kind of man who wore cufflinks on a Tuesday, and called everyone by their last name except the people he wanted to humiliate. He had been at Holloway Capital Management for 22 years. His father had started the firm, and Preston had inherited it the way some people inherit a bad temper. Completely and without apology. When Lena walked into the glass-walled conference room that Thursday morning, she noticed immediately that HR was already there. That never meant good news. "Hartwell," he said, not looking up from the folder on the table. "Sit down." She sat. The chair was the kind that swiveled, and she planted her feet to keep herself still. "We're restructuring," Preston said. He said it the way people say it's just business. Smoothly, without blinking. "Your position is being eliminated. Effective today." Lena didn't say anything right away. She was thinking about the rent check she had mailed 3 days ago. She was thinking about Mateo's soccer cleats. 2 sizes too small since September. She was thinking about the health insurance that was about to disappear. "Today," she repeated. "Security will escort you to collect your things. You'll receive 2 weeks severance." He finally looked up. Something moved across his face, not quite regret, more like the expression a person makes when they step around a puddle. "You've been a solid contributor, Hartwell. Truly. Solid contributor." She had doubled the returns on the Meridian account in 11 months. She had flown to 3 different cities in a single week to close the Brower deal when no one else would go. She had come in on Christmas Eve when the Singapore office called with a crisis because Mateo was at his grandma's, and she was the only one who answered. None of that was in the folder. She walked through the open floor of the office with a box of her things. A framed photo of Mateo at the Grand Canyon. A coffee mug he had painted in 2nd grade. A small succulent she had kept alive for 3 years through 3 office moves. And she felt every pair of eyes on her back. Some people looked away fast, others didn't bother. Donna Ashworth, who sat closest to the elevator bank and had always been kind to Lena, reached out and touched her arm as she passed. She didn't say anything, she just held on for a second. That almost broke Lena completely. She made it to the parking garage before she let herself breathe. She sat in her car. A 2017 Honda Accord with a cracked rear bumper she'd been meaning to fix. And she put the box on the passenger seat, and she put her hands in her lap, and she looked at the concrete wall in front of her. Mateo would be at school until 3:15. She had 6 hours. She drove home and changed out of the blazer, and folded it neatly over the back of the chair. Then she sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, and wrote down every number she knew. Savings, 4 months, maybe 5 if she was careful. Severance, 2 weeks, barely a dent. Mortgage, $1,200, daycare and after school, $600, utilities, groceries, gas. The numbers didn't improve the longer she looked at them. She had done this before. Not this exact thing, but the feeling underneath it. The particular kind of fear that lives in single-parent households. The one that wakes you at 2 in the morning and whispers, "What if?" Her husband Daniel had left when Mateo was 3, not dramatically, not loudly, just slowly and then completely, the way water drains from a sink. He sent birthday cards. He was not a villain, he was just somewhere else. Lena had built everything since then with her own hands. The job at Holloway Capital, the apartment they'd moved into when Mateo started kindergarten. The savings account she fed $20 at a time. She had been careful and determined. And she had not asked anyone for more than she could pay back. And now Preston Holloway had taken 2 weeks to undo 3 years of that. She had contacts, she reminded herself. She had a network. She pulled up her LinkedIn and started making a list of people she could reach out to, quietly, without making it look desperate. Former colleagues. A client she had worked with at her job before Holloway. A woman named Patricia Chen who had once said, at a conference in Phoenix, "If you ever want to talk about the next chapter, call me." Lena had never called. She had been too busy staying exactly where she was. She sent Patricia a short, professional email. She sent 3 others like it. Then she picked up Mateo at 3:15. And he climbed into the back seat and immediately started telling her about a kid in his class who could burp the alphabet. And she laughed. Actually laughed. And for exactly 4 minutes, she did not think about any of it. The weeks that followed were the kind that leave marks. She got 2 interviews, both of which went well enough to give her hope and then went quiet. She picked up freelance consulting work through a former colleague, enough to cover groceries but not much else. She made the savings stretch. She stopped ordering coffee at drive-thrus and started making it at home. And then she stopped buying the good coffee and switched to the store brand. And she told herself the difference wasn't that noticeable. Matteo noticed she was quieter. He was 8, not oblivious. "Mom," he said one evening, while she was doing dishes and he was at the kitchen table supposedly doing homework but actually drawing a race car. "Are we going to have to move?" She turned off the faucet. "Why would you think that?" He shrugged, the elaborate kind that kids use when they know more than they're letting on. Jalen's family had to move when his dad lost his job. They went to live with his grandma. "We're not moving," she said. She said it with more certainty than she had. He went back to his race car. She went back to the dishes. What she didn't tell him was that she had gotten a message that afternoon from a man named Warren Chu. The kind of message that doesn't come often, and that she had almost dismissed as spam. Warren ran a small private equity firm in Denver called Cornerstone Ventures. He had seen her name through a mutual contact and wanted to speak with her about a project. It was vague, it was short. She had almost deleted it 3 times, she wrote back. Warren Chu turned out to be nothing like Preston Holloway. He was soft-spoken and specific. He asked questions, and then actually listened to the answers. He explained that Cornerstone was in the middle of an acquisition. A mid-sized logistics company, based in Colorado. And they needed someone who could come in and evaluate the financial structure, identify inefficiencies, and help manage the transition. It was a contract position, 6 months, possibly longer. "I'll be honest with you," Warren said, on their second call. "I asked around about you before I reached out. Donna Ashworth speaks very highly of you." "Donna, of course. The work is real and it won't be easy," Warren continued. "But if you do it well, and I have every reason to believe you will, we'd want to talk about something permanent on the other side." Lena said she would think about it. She thought about it for approximately 40 seconds and then called him back and said yes. She did not tell anyone at first. She was superstitious about good news before it was certain. She didn't tell her mother, who would have made it into something bigger than it was, and then worried when it fell through. She didn't tell her friend Colette, who meant well but whose enthusiasm could sometimes feel like pressure. She just said yes to Warren, signed the contract and showed up quietly to the work. She was very good at the work. 3 months into the contract, Cornerstone made a move she hadn't expected. The acquisition expanded. The logistics company they were absorbing had been quietly sitting on a piece of technology. A routing optimization system. Built by the founder's son a decade ago. And never properly commercialized. That turned out to be worth considerably more than anyone had realized when the purchase price was set. Warren called her the morning the appraisal came back and read her the number twice because she didn't react the first time. "That's the value of the system alone," he said. "Not the company." "I know what I heard," she said. "Give me a minute." She went and stood in the bathroom of her apartment for a moment, both hands on the sink, and looked at herself in the mirror. The routing system fell under the scope of the contract she was managing. She had flagged it, actually, 6 weeks earlier, in a footnote in a report she had submitted to Warren that she wasn't sure anyone had read closely. She had written, "The subsidiary IP may warrant independent assessment." Warren had read it closely. "What I want to propose," he said, when she came back to the phone, "is a restructured arrangement. We want to bring you on as a full equity partner on the commercialization of this system. Not a salary, an equity stake." She sat down on the edge of the bathtub. "Lena," Warren said, "you found this. You should own part of it." She kept going to work. She kept picking Matteo up at 3:15. She kept making store-brand coffee and not fixing the bumper on the Accord and not telling anyone anything. Because she had learned, sometime in the years of building things alone, that the gap between what something might be and what it actually becomes can swallow you if you let it. And she had a child to raise and she couldn't afford to be swallowed. But she let herself think about it, sometimes, late at night when Matteo was asleep. She thought about what it would mean. Not the money itself, but the solidity of it. The feeling of knowing that the floor would hold. She had been managing the weight of uncertainty for so long that she had started to think of it as a permanent condition. Like a weather system that simply lived over her house. The idea that it might clear felt strange and almost suspicious. She went back and forth. She talked to a lawyer. She talked to a financial advisor. She read everything she could find about equity structures and dilution and exit strategies. And then she read it again, and then she signed the papers. 4 months later, the routing system was licensed to its first major client, a national freight carrier that operated across 32 states. The licensing deal was structured in a way that paid a recurring fee based on volume. Lena's share of the first payment arrived on a Thursday morning. She was sitting at the kitchen table when her phone buzzed with the bank notification. Mateo had already left for school. There was half a cup of store-brand coffee next to her laptop, and a permission slip she'd been meaning to sign for a field trip to the Science Museum. She looked at the number on her screen for a long time. Then she signed the permission slip. The call from Preston Holloway came 11 days later. She almost didn't recognize the number. She had deleted his contact long ago, but something about the sequence looked familiar, and she answered on the third ring. Hartwell, he said, and she knew immediately. Preston, she said. A pause. He was not comfortable with pauses, she remembered. He filled them. I wanted to reach out, he said. I've been following the Cornerstone deal. Some remarkable work. Truly remarkable. He paused again, shorter this time. I also wanted to say that I've been thinking about the way things concluded here, and I may have, the timing may not have been. Preston, she said. Yes, what is it you actually want? Another pause. Longer. We're looking at a significant portfolio expansion, he said. Some opportunities in the logistics sector, actually. And I thought, given your recent experience, I appreciate the call, Lena said. I really do. She said it pleasantly. She wasn't angry. She had been, for a while, the hot, efficient kind of angry that keeps you moving when you don't have the luxury of falling apart. But that had burned through a long time ago, replaced by something quieter and more durable. I'm not available, she said. But I genuinely wish you well with the expansion. She hung up. She sat for a moment with the phone in her hand. Outside the kitchen window, a pair of sparrows were fighting over something on the fire escape. Nothing unusual, just birds doing what birds do. She watched them for a minute. Then she called Warren. The Cornerstone team gathered for dinner that Friday. Warren, two of the partners, the legal team, and Lena, at a restaurant in downtown Denver that was the kind of place where the menus don't have prices. Lena wore the blazer, because it was the nicest thing she owned, and it fit well, and it had been sitting on the back of the chair long enough. Warren stood up at the end of the meal and said something about the year they'd had. About the team, about the system and what it was going to become. He looked at Lena when he said the part about having the right people see what others miss. She didn't give a speech. She wasn't the kind of person who gave speeches. She just raised her glass with everyone else and meant it. Walking to her car afterward, the Accord bumper still cracked. Her phone lit up with a text from Mateo. He was staying at her mother's for the night. Did you have fun, he had written. Did you eat steak? She smiled, yes and yes, she wrote back. Go to sleep. Is it true rich people have steak for dinner? She stopped on the sidewalk. The Denver evening was cold and clear, the kind of cold that comes with stars if you look up, and she looked up for a second. Who told you that, Jalen? Tell Jalen that rich people eat whatever they want, she wrote. Same as everyone else. Now. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Okay, love you, Mom. She got in the car. She sat for a second before she started the engine. The parking garage was quiet except for the distant sound of the elevator and her own breathing. She thought about the morning she had walked out of Holloway Capital with a box and a cracked bumper and 2 weeks of severance and a son who needed new cleats. She thought about the legal pad on the kitchen table and the numbers that didn't add up. She thought about Donna's hand on her arm, the one moment of human warmth in a hallway full of people looking away. She hadn't known that day what was on the other side of it. Nobody ever does. She had just gotten up the next morning and done the next thing, and the morning after that, and the one after that, and she had sent the email to Patricia Chen, and the email to Warren Chu. And she had shown up to the work, and written the footnote, and read the contract twice, and called the lawyer, and signed the papers, and made 1,000 small decisions that each seemed, at the time, like just the next thing to do. That was all it ever was, the next thing. Done carefully, done honestly. Done with the knowledge that Mateo was watching, even when he was drawing race cars and pretending not to. She had never set out to prove anything to Preston Holloway. The point was never Preston. The point was the rent check. The point was the cleats. The point was being the kind of person her son would remember clearly, and without ambivalence when he was grown. She started the car. Tomorrow she would buy the good coffee. She would schedule the bumper repair. She would take Mateo to the Science Museum on the field trip day. Sign up to chaperone, because she could now, because she had Fridays back, and she intended to use them. She would call her mother and not talk about money. She would take a walk. She had done hard things before. She had learned, somewhere in the middle of them, that hard things don't usually announce themselves as turning points. They just arrive looking like Tuesdays. This had been a Tuesday, and then another. And then enough of them, done well, that something shifted. She pulled out of the garage and into the Denver night, and the city was lit up, and ongoing, the way cities are, full of people in the middle of their own Tuesdays, And she drove home through all of it, thinking about nothing in particular, which was, for the first time in a long time, exactly what it felt like to be fine.